When I was a little kid, I would sit in front of the TV for hours at a time watching cartoons. One of my favorite channels was Nickelodeon, just like most 2000s kids. There were so many iconic shows to choose from, like Jimmy Neutron and Drake and Josh. There was one cartoon that I was super into, but it wasn't nearly as popular as the SpongeBob's and Rugrats of Nickelodeon, which meant that Nickelodeon would only air it once a week, but it was the most important time of the week for cartoons: Saturday mornings. Rocket Power was one of my all-time favorite cartoons when I was a kid. I used to watch it on Saturday mornings. It was such a gnarly cartoon. In the summer of 2004, I was at Toys R Us with my parents. I was looking for a GameCube game to get, and I picked out Rocket Power Beach Bandits. My dad looked at the box of the game and told me that I wouldn't like the game because it was about skateboarding and ziplining and shit. And I told him that I wanted it anyways, so my dad bought it right there, and we went home to play it. That shit was epic when I was a kid, and it still is, goddammit. Me and my dad would go on so many GameCube adventures back when I was a child. And I'm glad as hell that Rocket Power Beach Bandits was one of them. When you get past the start screen, you're in the shore shack.
Rocket Power!
The first thing that me and my dad did was go into the campaign mode. This was such a perfect game to play right when school ended for summer vacation. This was the first game I would play when school was over after finishing 9th and 10th grade. Me and my friend Joe, who I met back in high school, had this game as a kid. This game means a lot to both of us, so when we played this game together, we shared a nostalgic experience after hearing the very first line of the game. It was so iconic to our childhoods.
School's out for summer!
Let's get down to the shore shack for some outrageous thick shakes and some serious grindage. Oh, I'm so hungry.
Then time for the first surf of a long, long summer.
Last one to the shore shack.
So the first thing that happens is that Team Rocket notices that the sand is gone. Good God, the cutscenes in the game are so cheap. My friend Joe does the funniest impression of how the NPCs move when they talk.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. When I first saw Ocean Shores, I said to myself, what a marvelous, friendly community.
After the cutscenes, the first thing me and my dad did was run down the stairs ramp at the beginning of the game and started shooting hockey pucks. Then we met Lars and his gang. Even though these cutscenes are crap, they still hold a special place in my heart. I remember watching this cutscene for the first time with my dad and thought that Lars and his friends were the cool kids. My dad would have a skate off against Pi. My dad kicked his ass without breaking a sweat. I was decent at this when I was a little kid, but when I reached my teenage years, this was cake to me. All you need is 15,000 points and I would finish with 150,000 points. The skateboarding is the best part about this game. The loading screens in this game aren't annoying at all, because it's always fun looking at the cartoon drawing that shows up on the screen. They give you tips too. Exploring Ocean Shores is one of my favorite parts of the game. I watched Rocket Power on Saturday mornings as a child. I was also a fan of the cartoon during my teenage years, so seeing a visual representation of Ocean Shores was so righteous. Me and my dad would see the tack poster in Ocean Shores, and it would get my dad to buy me Tack and the Power of Juju a year later. There are teasers for Tack and the Power of Juju throughout the entire game. You can go to the city and the pier if you'd like, and you have to in various parts of the game anyways. In the city, I used to skateboard around just doing tricks and such. When I was a child and I went to the pier, I would skateboard in there and I would mess around so much that somehow I would end up on the roofs of the buildings, which you're not supposed to do. I would go up to the lighthouse and stare at the sky and the water. It gave me the feeling of a Nickelodeon kid, a 2000s Nickelodeon kid. Oh, the memories. You gotta go to the lakes to find out information about why the sand is missing. The music sounds like it should have been in the movie Holes. This is when you start fighting robots. The combat in this game is pretty simple. You just shoot hockey pucks at the robots. If you're close enough to an enemy, you swing at them instead. Whenever you're not in Ocean Shores, the game tends to be boring at parts. Back in May of 2005, my older sister was throwing a party. My dad took me with him to the store to buy bread. When we came back, I witnessed the perfect party. All the motherfuckers had spiky hair and the chicks were all wearing band shirts. The music that was playing at the party was Sum 41's latest album, Chuck. It was the best time to be alive, the 2000s. Everything was so much better back then. While the party was going on, my dad didn't want me bothering my sister's friends, so he sat me down in front of the living room TV to play Rocket Power. I was skateboarding inside the dome while the party was going on around me. Then I went back to the party. There was some dude who I kept bothering because I was trying to tell him something while he was dancing. He was annoyed and told my sister, "Barbie, can you tell your little brother to leave me alone?" And my sister replied, "That's not my brother, that's my cousin." Months passed since the party and I was playing with my dad. My dad was taking pictures of the evidence of Gollum taking the sand. This was one of the enjoyable parts of the campaign. There are 2 more instances where you have to take pictures, but unfortunately the developers of this game had the brilliant idea to repeat the same cutscene every time you finish taking the pictures.
Fire it up and show us what you got, Twister. Let's see if it's good enough for the zine.
These pictures will be used as evidence to take down Gollum Industries. Nobody gives a shit about your stupid newspaper, Reggie. Later that year, it was New Year's. Family and friends of the family were over. I got to hang out with my childhood friends Francisco and Cesar. They were watching me play Rocket Power. I was ziplining through the lakes. It may sound sad, but it took me a few tries to get through it since I was only 7 years old. This part was a blast. The next day was the beginning of a new year, and after having a blast playing Rocket Power Beach Bandits the night before, I had made it a New Year's resolution to complete the game, as at this point I had owned the game for a year and a half with very little to show for it. That's because I kept messing around in the game. For the next several months, I would constantly bug my dad to play it with me so he could beat the game for me. One of my favorite missions is where you have to collect all of the stink bombs Lars dropped in the city. In return, Lars lets you know how to get into Wishing Waters. The surface of Wishing Waters is one of my favorite parts of the game. You leave Ocean Shores, but you're still having a good time. Once you make it beneath the water park, the game gets boring. You have to fight robots and do parkour and shit. When you use Sam to control the robot, it gets a little interesting because the robot sergeant is teaching you how to use the robot, sort of like boot camp. The robot sergeant says funny shit to keep you from falling asleep, but the gameplay is still whack. My dad would go on to take pictures with Twister and solve a computer puzzle with Sam, which was solid fun, but the exciting part is where you unlock the hoverboard. When my dad got the hoverboard, I thought it was so cool. It was better than the skateboard because instead of skating, you hover. When you report back to Ocean Shores, one of the first things you have to do is one of my favorite missions in the game. Raimundo, who was initially concerned about the success of the Shore Shack since the tourists won't be coming to Ocean Shores for the beach since the sand is missing, receives an unexpected wave of orders. He has a lot of orders to deliver around the city, but he's too busy at the Shore Shack, so he sends Team Rocket to deliver it for him. I had a lot of fun watching my dad go around the city delivering the food. When you get back to the shore, Gollum Jr. challenges you to a bumper cars contest going on in the pier where he'll be waiting for you in the final round. The bumper cars contest is one of the fun parts of the game. Your next stop is Mondo Mountain. Lars challenges Reggie to a race. In return, he shows you how to get inside the mountain itself. Racing Lars down the mountain is a fun race. When you get into the mountain, I was playing this part when I was 12. My childhood best friend Nicholas was with me. He had told me that he couldn't believe that these kids are jumping over lava and risking their lives all over some sand. I'll stop spoiling the game right here in case you want to play it for yourself, because I'm pretty close to the end of the campaign. Now it's time to talk about the other features of the game. The zine is where you go to play all the objectives you already completed in the campaign. This is where I spent the most amount of my time playing Rocket Power Beach Bandits. When I was 7 years old, I would play either Madtown Free Skate or Wishing Waters. I would play in Wishing Waters over and over again because I enjoy the level design and platforming. I would be playing this level in my room and my sister would be next to me on the computer listening to music. I would instigate a conflict by raising the game's volume higher than my sister's music. Then she would raise the volume on the computer. Then we would go back and forth outdoing each other. I invested so much time into Madtown Free Skate. When I was 7 years old, my grandparents were visiting from Venezuela. They would stay in my room since I had a bunk bed. I would play in Madtown Free Skate and I would ask them if I had 1,000,000 points. Then my grandpa would tell me that I had nowhere near 1,000,000 points. The summer that I was 15 and 16, I played Rocket Power Beach Bandits to death. I would beat the campaign mode those summers for the 3rd and 4th time, but I would spend a lot more time in Free Skate. I would spend 2 to 3 hours a day skating around just thinking in my head. It felt as if I was pacing. I would often listen to music while I did this. I would inspect every little detail of Ocean Shores as I would watch the cartoon at the time. I was a fan of the cartoon, so I had a great time repeatedly skating around Ocean Shores and gazing at the visuals, despite how small the world is. The multiplayer in this game is mediocre. First and foremost, this is a GameCube game. It should be up to 4 players, not just 2. I had a couple of opportunities to play it during my childhood and I had a decent time. I remember playing it with my childhood friend and she was telling me that Reggie's a stupid bitch. One thing that's cool is that you can play as characters from the show outside of Team Rocket, like Lars and his friends. My favorite thing to do in multiplayer is bumper carts, and skating against your buddy is a decent way to pass the time. There are also a few extras included in the game. What Nick game for the GameCube is complete without trailers promoting other Nickelodeon games and VHS tapes? My friend Joe told me that on the PS2 version of Rocket Power Beach Bandits, you're able to watch an episode of Rocket Power in the extras. In the gallery, you get to look at the pictures of the shit that was going on in Gollum Industries. Rocket Power Beach Bandits is probably the game I've invested the most time into in my entire life. And it's pretty sad considering how mediocre the game is. When I was a little kid, I didn't notice any of the flaws in the game. But as I got older, I realized that Rocket Power Beach Bandits isn't as great as I initially thought. But I loved the cartoon so much that it made me enjoy the game anyways. Now you may be thinking, why have I spent so much time playing this game? It's a piece of shit. And I agree, but it's my piece of shit. Rocket Power Beach Bandits came out during the cash-in explosion where seemingly every Nickelodeon show had a video game. As a 2000s kid, when you played games based on your favorite cartoons, it was nearly impossible not to love the games no matter how good or bad they were. Rocket Power Beach Bandits is a game that 2000s kids look back at fondly. Maybe not because of the gameplay, but because of the memories we have of watching Rocket Power on Saturday mornings and using our imagination to make the best out of what we had.